Welcome to Off the Rails, brought to you by the Model Railway YouTube community group, MRYCG, connecting the Model Railway community together. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course YouTube. Just search for MRYCG. Hello all and welcome to episode 7 of Off the Rails with MRYCG. This month is an Over the Pond special. In this episode we have 3 interviews for you from American railroad modelers. Also coming up later in the show we have all the usual features such as the monthly news briefing, details of competitions, talking points with Luke and Oliver, and the brilliant Disaster Diaries by James Cullen. Listen out for the guest newsreader this month, who is a member of the MRYCG Juniors group. So with autumn now upon us, we are all going to be doing a lot more modelling with the night drawing in. So we hope you'll enjoy the show while doing so. Okay then, so now it's time to jump on the jet plane, head over the pond and get you on your way into a journey of model railroad and railway-filled entertainment. Hello and welcome to this latest interview on the Off the Rails podcast with MRYCG. In this episode, I bring to you Vinny of BNSF 6951 on YouTube. Welcome, Vinny.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me aboard. Welcome. And thank you to all the people that are watching or listening to this, I should say.
Indeed. It's an honour as well to have you here to be interviewed, along with a lot of others that are over the pond. So, Vinny, we've got you here to answer some of the questions that many of the other model railroaders have been answering, and we're going to get straight on with question 1 for you. And that's, how long have you been in model railroading?
I am in model railroading about 30 years.
That's getting on for some time now, then.
Yes, 30 years, and about 28 of those 30 years was with N-scale.
So you say there that you're N-scale at the moment. You've been another scale in the past, then?
When I first started, when I was a kid, my dad got me a Lionel set, which was 027 gauge. Of course, I don't know what happened to that set. It's gone for a long time. But when I did start getting back into the modeling aspect, I started off in HL.
You say your dad got you involved there. Now, was he your inspiration then into getting into model railroading?
I guess you could say that, because if he didn't get me the train set, then I never would have got into it. So yeah, I would think so.
So you're now modelling N-gauge, or N-scale, as many of you might know. Yeah, over in the pond, for those that you don't know, N-scale and N-gauge are totally different scales stroke gauges from us here in the UK. Now you model in N-scale. How long has the current layout that you're building been under construction?
Well, I moved into this house in March 21st of 2003, and March 22nd of 2003 is when I saw the layout.
Wow, that's some time then. It's been ongoing for quite some time.
Yeah, it's about 7 years right now, almost 7 years.
And from what I've seen, for those of you that haven't seen any of Vinny's videos on his YouTube channel, I've seen that it's quite a large layout, covering not just one room, but 2.
Yes, it's got 2 rooms. Now, I actually bought this house because of the way it was configured, because I knew that those 2 rooms being adjacent to each other, that I would use both rooms for my layout. I've gone through the wall 2 times to go out and then come back in, and then go out again and come back in. So yeah, I've gone 2 times with holes in the wall.
So not only have you gone between 2 rooms, you're also on multi-levels as well.
Yes, in fact, I am working on my 3rd level as we speak.
That must be some mileage then that your trains run on those rails.
Well, if you watch the video I just posted today, I did a test run on about 1/3 of the layout with the new track that I just installed. And it took 7 minutes for that train to go around at scale speed. And that's only 1/3 of my layout. So add another 14 minutes onto that, it'll be about a 21-minute run.
It would be very interesting to know what that is in real scale miles or kilometers, really.
I know how to figure it out. It's 33 feet equal 1 scale mile in N scale. I don't know how much track I have. I can tell you that my helix alone has 2 miles of track in it.
Wow, that is indeed a long layout. Now, we mentioned obviously it goes between two rooms. It's on multi levels. Now, are both rooms scenic?
No, there's only a few sections on the layout that are scenic at this point. And then when I started construction on what I'm doing right now, it's such a mess. I just have to get my vacuum out and start cleaning it up. And because I want to run a train the whole layout, just to see how it looks and everything like that. The upper level that I'm doing right now is going to be a combination of two things. First of all, when I built the layout, I never completed the exact entire run of the subdivision that I'm doing. The subdivision I'm doing is 195 miles long. It goes from Phoenix, which I live in. It goes up to Williams, and that's where the BNSF Transcon is, and that's where it connects up to the Transcon. So what I am doing now on my layout is actually finishing that last piece, but I'm also putting a twist in there with the scenic route, is what I'm working on right now.
So you mentioned Phoenix. Is that then the layout based on real location?
Oh, yeah. I would say about 80% prototypical.
And features a lot of the scenics of the real location?
Yes, sir.
Now, I know you're well into scratch building virtually everything for the layout. How did that actually come about, the scratch building?
Well, as I mentioned earlier about being in the group from way back in the day, the owner of that group, his name was Mike Phillips. He asked me to start doing some scratch builds on video. Now, at that time, I wasn't really good. I was just like kind of fumbling through it and this and that and everything. But as time went on, of course, when you practice a lot, you get better at it. And I think my buildings that I'm doing now are pretty substantial and pretty nice.
From what I've seen, you've got a very varied audience of modelers who thoroughly enjoy watching your scratch building. How would you say you are in the level then of experience in your scratch building? Would you put yourself as highly experienced now?
I would say, there's a lot of stuff that I still don't know how to do. For instance, Sparky had asked me to do a model of his house. I didn't feel that I had enough experience to do it for him. And so I kind of said, well, I can't do it. And that's one of the things I need to work on to get to that level of, like the person who's doing it is Mark Stewart. And I'd like to be at his level. I consider myself probably to be moderate, not a rookie, but a couple of steps above rookie.
What would you say is your favorite part of building a model railroad?
That's a hard question because there's a lot of parts I like doing. Now, one of the things I'm going to say is going to drive a lot of people crazy, but I like doing wiring, believe it or not. And there's a lot of people that shy away from the wiring, but it's not hard. It's get you into weird positions as far as, getting under the table and stuff like that. But I like doing wiring. Second thing I like doing is the track work and scenery. And then after that, it's the scratch builds and so on and so forth.
Now, there's a lot of different tracks available on the over the pond market, very much different from what we got here in the UK. What type of track are you using for your layout then?
I am using Microengineering Code 55 track, and there's only two gauges for N scale. It's either Code 80 or Code 55. Code 80, the rail's a little taller, and the ties or sleepers, as you guys call them, are further apart. With the Code 55, the rail is smaller, narrower, and the ties are closer together, so they look more prototypical.
Very more fine scale then.
Yeah, basically.
What would you say is your worst part of model railroading then? We've done the best. What do you hate the most?
Well, like I said, I like doing wiring, but the part I hate about doing the wiring is getting under the table. I'm an old man, I can't bend as easily as a lot of young guys can,
Throughout your modelling career, what would you say has been your proudest moment or achievement?
My proudest moment actually was getting this layout that I'm doing right now up and running, because it, without a doubt, is the biggest layout I have ever worked on or I have ever built. So it was a great achievement for me to get it up and running with very few problems.
Prior to the one you're doing now, and you mentioned the one with your father. Have you built any other previous layouts?
Uh, well, actually, I think I lied to you about when I bought the house. Actually, I bought the house in 2013. I moved to Arizona in 2003. And while I was in that, when I first moved to Arizona, I was in an apartment, and my youngest daughter was living with me at the time. So I had a 3-bedroom apartment, which I only needed 2 bedrooms. But guess what the third bedroom was for?
There's always another reason to have another bedroom.
Yeah. So my first layout when I moved here to Arizona was in an apartment size room. In fact, I actually took over my master bedroom and moved out into the living because I moved into a 2-bedroom after a while. I gave my daughter the bedroom and I slept out in the living room on the couch and used the master bedroom as my layout room.
Always a good reason to have the best room as the model railway room.
Exactly.
What would you say is your most favourite locomotive or rolling stock that you currently own?
My favorite locomotive now and always has been an SD40-2. The second after that would be an SD70 Ace. My favorite rolling stock are two, hoppers and tankers. I just love running unit trains of either one.
Now, at the beginning, we mentioned a particular name. Your channel is called BNSF 6951. Why is it?
Okay, the BNSF is because of the railroad. When I first started in the hobby, it was Burlington Northern and Santa Fe, both independent of each other. And I used to model both. But when they joined forces and became BNSF, that made my day. Because that means now I could run any kind of locomotives pertaining to those two companies on my layout and not have a problem with it. So the BNSF is because of the railroad. The 6951 is two reasons. Number one, it's a number on a locomotive, a BNSF locomotive. And number two, it's my birthday.
That's ingenious. How could that be such a perfect 4-digit number to select? So the layout, the N-scale layout, does it have an actual particular name, or is it just focused on the region that you're from?
Well, the actual name of the route that's here in Phoenix that goes up to Williams is called the Peavine subdivision. And so my layout is the Peavine subdivision. Like I said, it's about 80% prototypical as far as the downtown part where all the industries are downtown, and then as far as the scenery goes and all that stuff and various towns that it goes through, it's close, but not 100%.
Do you have any part of the layout that is in place at the moment that you actually regret doing and plan to go back to and fix?
That's a good question. Well, if I had thought about what I actually wanted to do, I probably would have had this third level built at the same time I was building everything else. So that's one thing I do regret because now I have to build over everything that's down there and it's creating a big mess of everything underneath. It's like sawdust all over the place and I had to take a lot of my detail stuff off and scenery is getting hurt. It's all kinds of stuff like that. So that's one thing I do regret.
What are your thoughts on bringing the younger generation into model railroading?
Oh, I would love to get as many youngsters into the hobby because if we don't, us as far as you and I are concerned, in our age group, if we don't get young kids, 13, 14 years old, even younger, to get into the hobby's going to go away. So I am all for getting kids into the hobby.
Would you think that social media and forums are playing a big part in encouraging the younger generation then to get more into it?
I think they are, and I think it's helping the people that do not have a YouTube channel yet, that they can post, a couple of pictures of what they're doing on the social media, like Facebook or whatever, especially all these different groups that are going on right now. It gives them an opportunity to start putting their pictures or even pictures of their layout or running layout on a Facebook page. This way they could build up to a YouTube page.
And now for the final question before we hit the quick fire round. What inspirations in the model railroad scene do you have that have encouraged you to progress your layout as it is today?
Just the fact that I'm copying that's something that's real is what I like about it. It's like I can actually get in my car and drive down to these places, which is not far, 20 minutes from my house. I can go to the yard in 20 minutes, or I can go to any of the industries that are around the yard that I have modeled. I can go there and look at them and take pictures and so on and so forth.
It's lovely to have a railroad in your backyard.
Yes. In fact, we can take it a step further. A few years ago, I met a girlfriend through YouTube. And just posting my videos, this lady said to me, "Gee, that's right in my backyard." So I said, "Oh, really?" She says, "Yeah." I says, "Well," I said, "Do you want to come over and check it out?" And she said, "Yeah."
Ah.
And it wound up to be a good thing for a while.
Well, love attracts in the most oddliest of ways, they could say.
Really.
Okay, so there we go with the main questions, but I do have one final question for you, Vinny, and that's, you have a nickname. Tell us about that.
Well, because my name is Vinny, and because there was a show on TV quite a while back with Joe Pesci, who was playing Vinny, and he was cousin Vinny. So I decided to jump on that and play on it, and became my my live stream is Friday Night with cousin Vinny.
Well, thank you very much for answering those main questions. We're now going to go over to the quickfire round, which is non-model railroad related questions. So if you're ready, Vinny, we'll get on with those questions.
Let's have it.
So quickfire question 1, Vinny, is what is your favourite beverage?
Well, when I was drinking, it was tequila. But right now, it's just water and soda.
Question 2, what is your favourite snack?
York peppermint patties.
And final question, question 3, what is your favourite all-time TV show?
My favorite all-time TV show is a show here in the United States. I don't know if you guys get it over there, but it's called Blue Bloods.
So there we go. We've had the quickfire round and we've had the main questions from Vinny. Some really good answers from you. Thank you very much for taking your time, Vinny, to answer them. But one final thing we need to do to let the listeners know is, where can we find you and your modelling?
Well, you can find me on YouTube, BNSF 6950 on at youtube.com.
So if you do like your scratch building, you do like your end scale modelling, then make sure you check out Vinny's channel straight after this podcast. Thank you very much, Vinny.
Thank you so much for having me on board. I appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun.
It's an absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone. Remember, stay safe, stay well, and keep on railroading. Until
Take care,
next
everyone.
time. Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Andy from the Worley Club, and today I just want to talk about the Worley virtual event. If you normally come to our Worley show at the NEC, unfortunately this year, because of the pandemic, it won't take place, but why don't you check out our feeds on the 28th and 29th of November on Facebook and on YouTube. Also check out the feeds on the Model Railway YouTube community group, who will be there to support the event. We hope to see you over the weekend, and we hope you participate in all the activities and get involved. See you then.
Do you want to get involved? Then why not check out the official Facebook page and group. Just search for MRYCG, the Model Railway YouTube community group.
Hello and welcome to this latest interview for Over the Pond, the Off the Rails podcast with MRYCG. In this interview, I am introducing you to Wilma of the Indian Head Valley Railroad. Welcome, Wilma.
Welcome. Hello.
Now, you are, as we say, over the pond here in the UK. You are in the States. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and a little bit about your history in why you're where you are.
I was born and raised here in Everson, Pennsylvania, a little mountain community. Used to be very big in railroads at the turn of the 20th century. Lots of railroad history here. Still a lot of railroads. I've lived here all my life. This is where I am. We're in southwestern Pennsylvania and around the mountains and rivers and about 40 miles south of Pittsburgh.
Now, just moments before we did go live to make this recording for this interview, I heard what I thought at first was your model railroad, because you are in the room right now doing this interview in your model railroad room, but it turns out you actually have a railroad in your back garden.
Yeah, the Southwestern Pennsylvania Railroad runs right below my house, less than It's a block away. And I do a lot of rail fanning right off my front porch. I can look out the back window. I can see the trains coming through. There's lots of brush and trees in the way. So the best is to go out on the front porch and take the camera and get some good stuff.
So there's a lot of people that could be quite jealous of saying that they wanted a monorail road in their backyard, going round their backyard, but you beat that with a 1-to-1 scale, real life, right there.
Yes. Yeah, they be envious. At 3 o'clock in the morning, wouldn't be so envious.
Now, you have a model railroad, and it's called Indian Head Valley Railroad. Tell us a little bit about the name, why it was chosen.
There's a little town not far from here called Indian Head. I just liked the name, and I just picked it out, decided, well, that's what I'm going to call it. There wasn't no particular reason at all. Later on, I found out that there was a real railroad called the Indian Creek Valley Railroad that ran up through the mountains, and it was a tributary off of the B&O Railroad back in the, I think it was 1912, if I remember right. So, but I don't base it off of that. My railroad is totally a fantasy in my mind, and I don't base it off of any particular period. But if I had to put it as a period that I railroaded, probably I would say most of it I'll probably railroad is the late 1950s, early 60s, between the transition era. And then if I'm in the right mood, you'll see modern stuff come through. So Back to the Future. I really, that's my railroad.
So you mentioned that you no particular era, but you like to focus on some particular eras. Now, what was your very first train or train set model railroad?
It was an Amtrak set that I bought back in the, I'm going to say it was around 1995. I bought it just to have under my tree and for my children. To have my children, well, it ended up I was the only child that really was interested in it, except for my son. My son was interested in it, but I was going to play with it. So,
what's been your favourite part of building your railroad?
So far, filming it. That's the truth. I have more fun with the YouTube part of the hobby than I think. And I enjoy it all. I really do, except for wiring. I don't like wiring. But my favorite is probably filming it. I love to film, like train coming around.
You mentioned that your layout is all pretty much as you wish, as you want it to be. Have you got any parts of the layout that you've built already that you're not pleased with and you plan to go back to and rework?
I'm in the middle of doing that right now. I had it pretty much set up where it was running really good, and I decided I wanted to put road bed in because I didn't have road bed under it. And when I tore it up, I said, oh, you know what, Mom, this doesn't work real good over here. And I tore this out, I put this in, and I'm still doing that. Working on it as we speak.
At what age would you say you were first got involved into model railroading, and what inspired you to do so?
I really wasn't into model railroading until about 4 years ago. I had got ill and I had a heart attack, and I wasn't allowed to go back to work. And I ended up sitting around going stir crazy. And my son had a layout, and he asked me, he said, well, I'll tell you what, Dad, he said, I'll buy the stuff to get you started, and let's do a layout in your spare room and give you something to do. And voila.
And he's kind of left you to it now, has he?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. He still helps me out quite a bit. Couldn't ask for a better son. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have any of this stuff.
What has been your proudest moment of your hobby time so far?
The proudest moment? That's a good question. My proudest moment, I think, is still to come. But you know what? My proudest moment, I did a diorama contest where I scratch built a feed. It was a feed store, and I scratch built that from start to finish and decided to give it away, the prize. Well, my son said he didn't want it to leave the family, so he paid the winner for the diorama. He bought it off of him because he didn't want to leave the family. It's on display at his house over top of his layout. So,
Wow.
yeah. So that'd probably be my proudest moment.
Of your rolling stock and locomotives that you currently own, what are your favourites?
Oh, I'm glad you said favorite because I have more than one. Probably, I have 2 locomotives that were gifts to me that I'm very fond of. It's a Norfolk Southern SD60FG, and it is the 911 model, which is their tribute to emergency workers, which I love that thing. And Sparky sent me that. And I'll tell you the truth, when I opened it up and seen that he sent me this, it brought tears to my eyes. It was just that type of a moment. And the other one, I got sent to me, FA and B unit, Pennsylvania Railroad, Walther's locomotive, and it was sent to me by a mystery person. I have no idea who sent it. To this day, I don't know who sent it. I got it in the mail one day and no note, nothing. And then I have, this was a Christmas present for my son. It's an undecorated Bachmann Spectrum SD 45. This is a project for me to do in the future. It is DCC ready, but it don't have sound yet. I am going to paint it in my Indian Head Valley colors, and it's going to be my first Indian Head Valley loco.
What locos or rolling stock that you don't have would you like to have?
I would like a Class 37 loco. I'm a big fan of them. That was something I like. When I say foreign power, definitely foreign power on mine. So that's one of the locos that I'd like to have. I would like to get a few more steam locomotives. I have one that's DCC.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you like the YouTube side of the hobby. Tell us a little bit about what you do for the hobby on YouTube.
Well, my main thing is I do a show called Not Bad. And what got me started with it was kind of Sparky inspired me to start this show that I do. I did a couple videos where I was reviewing stuff from Wish. I was reviewing some of that stuff, and I kept on saying Not Bad. And he said, "Why don't you do a show called Not Bad?" So I did. And I started my show out shouting out other YouTube channels I thought was not bad. And it really grew.
So, if you do not yet follow Wilbur with his Indian Head Valley Model Railroad YouTube channel, then make sure you do check it out because you need to be watching the Not Bad series. One final question then to take us towards the end of the main questions before we hit the quick fire round, Wilma. And that's how useful do you find the online social media and forums are towards modelling information?
I find model railroading is pretty much universal as far as I'm concerned. Trains are cool no matter where they are. I watch videos from the UK. I watch videos from Australia. I watch videos from Germany. I even have one from Italy and one from France that I watch. I don't understand a word they're saying, but I understand what they're doing. And I have a fellow from Japan that I watch. So I like watching train. Doesn't matter where it's from.
Fantastic answers there, Wilma. Thank you very much for answering the main questions. I do hope the listeners have enjoyed hearing your answers. But now we're going to be taking you on to the quick fire round, Wilma. The 3 non-model railway related questions. So if you are ready, we'll fire off with question 1.
Go ahead.
Okay then, quick fire question 1. What is your favourite beverage?
Iced tea.
Question 2. What is your favourite snack?
I would say cookies.
And the final question, question 3. What is your favourite all-time TV show?
Without any hesitation at all, has to be Gunsmoke, which is a Western.
Excellent answers there. A little bit of an insight, deeper insight into the modeller that's not model railway or model railroad related. Thank you very much, Wilma, for those quick fire answers, and thank you very much also for the answers in the main round. Before we do say goodbye in this interview, though, Wilma, please let the listeners know where they can find you and your modelling career.
Best place to find me would be on YouTube under the Indian Head Valley Railroad, or they can go to my Facebook. I have an Indian Head Valley Railroad Facebook group. The Indian Head Valley Railroad group is free to anybody to come in. I have it open to the public.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much. So there you go, the Indian Head Valley Railroad Facebook group and the Indian Head Valley Railroad YouTube channel. Check him out on both places. Join the group, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy lots of not bad from Wilma. So before you go, Wilma, let's hear, how was this interview?
No, not bad.
There we go. Thank you very much, Wilma. So until next time, listeners, take care, stay safe, and remember, best of all, keep on model railroading. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Owen.
And I'm Jack. And we are the group leaders
for
for
MRYCG Juniors.
We are a group of 13 to 18-year-olds who are just getting started in our model railway adventure.
Our group is fully moderated and we are building a community of young people with advice and much more.
We hope to offer monthly competitions and fortnightly streams with our ever-growing community.
If you would like to join, go to facebook.com/groups/MRYCG Juniors or visit our website at mrycg.com under the social media tab.
For any questions or queries, get in touch with us via email juniors@mrycg.com.
Happy modelling!
Hello and welcome to this latest episode from Off the Rails podcast with MRYCG. This time I introduce to you Heath Hurwitz of Humanity Junction. Welcome, Heath.
Jason, thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, for those that are listening, you might notice a bit of an accent. Tell us, where are you from, Heath?
Jason, I would argue that it's you that has the accent. I live in New York City, here in the U.S.
A lovely place, the Big Apple as it's known.
Absolutely.
Now, we've got you here because we feel that you've got something special with your modelling that we want to talk about. Now, a lot of people will see you on YouTube quite a lot recently, and that name, Humanity Junction. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Humanity Junction came out of a project that I did probably about 10 to 12 years ago now, where New York City was asking for proposals to revitalize the lower part of Manhattan. And a couple of my friends and I came up with this idea of kind of merging the human element and the city element together. The way the name's actually spelled is I do have a C in it as well, so it's sort of spelled Human City, but I just say humanity because I like to focus on the human part of it. But the project was a city revitalization project where we were going to make the wayfinding kiosks look like human beings, and people would be able to navigate themselves through this area of the city by using these human-shaped kiosks. So that's how Humanity was born. And then when I decided to do the YouTube channel, I liked how Humanity Junction sounded, so I decided to use that for my channel name.
Now, you say you do modelling. Now, over the pond, as we say here in the UK, you generally focus on two scales over there, and that's N scale or HO scale. What scale do you focus on?
My channel is currently focusing on N scale, which is actually 1/160th, as opposed to N gauge, which I believe you refer to as 1/148. I'm currently modeling N scale due to the space that I have for my modeling. I do all of my modeling and all my layout stuff on a 50-inch by 30-inch desktop. So it wasn't really practical for me to do a larger scale at this time. I do also have a lot of HO scale rolling stock. I also have some G scale rolling stock, but currently the only thing that I am working with is N scale.
Now, you state that you're focusing your build, your layout on Lower Manhattan. What era of Lower Manhattan would you say it's actually being built around?
Yeah, so my modeling isn't so much about Lower Manhattan. That was just sort of the influence for the YouTube channel name. The modeling that I'm doing is primarily based around the circus and how it traveled by rail. So I have a large collection of circus trains as well as carnival trains. And I'm really looking at the time in America where before we had the internet, the only way you could see certain things was if they came to your town. And in the case of the circus, it came to your town via railroad. My layout is going to have some elements of New York Central and possibly Pennsylvania Railroad. So it'll kind of be in that realm, the New York Central Pennsylvania Railroad realm. But the focus is really going to be about what happens when the circus comes to town and then the circus leaves town. So it's how do you get the large circus trains into the yards and into the cities, and then how do they pack up and head back out?
So the current build, though, that you're doing then, how long has that been under construction?
I started in about February. I was trying to come up with a way to build a layout. And what I quickly realized is that I didn't really have any permanent space. And to run the length of cars that I wanted to run, I just wasn't going to be able to build something in my one-bedroom apartment that fit that. So I started building T-track modules. So most of the T-track modules are very simple. They're just a double main line, and you connect them together with other people's T-track modules. And that way, when you go to shows, you could run your longer trains. But in your own homes, you're only working on much smaller sections of the entire layout.
So with that under construction, have you built then any other layouts prior to this build?
Back in the 80s, I lived in Pennsylvania, and we had a very large basement. And on one side of the basement, my father had some O-scale and some G-scale trains set up. And then on the other side, I had a huge O-scale layout. But at the time, I didn't really know about operations. The amount of information available was much harder to access. I had some books and I'd been to train shows, but I didn't really know what I was building. So by the time I went off to college, I basically just had some loops of track running, and that was pretty much the extent of my layout. And then it wasn't until Christmas of 2019 where I got back into model railroading again and really found my enjoyment of the scenery part of it as well as just the tracks.
Now, you mentioned your father then. Now, would he be your inspiration?
My father was definitely the person that got me into model trains, although I feel like my inspiration might have actually been the TV show Silver Spoons. I don't know if you guys had that show over in the UK, but in the show Silver Spoons, they had a ride-on locomotive, and the star of the show would enter and exit scenes basically riding this ride-on train into his house. And ever since I saw that, I always wanted to have this huge layout that could actually like take me somewhere. And that was basically my inspiration for it, was wanting to be able to, travel myself over rail. When I was a kid, my dad did have an O-scale railroad. So I did grow up with, it wasn't just a loop of track. It did have some turnouts in it, but it was basically a pretty simple O-scale layout. And as, we grew a little bit older, we started going to train shows together, and he expanded his O-scale collection. And that's when I really got into HO scale. I would go to train shows and I would see all of these Ather and Blue Box kits. And at the time they were pretty inexpensive. So I'd, buy a couple kits at all of these train shows and bring them home. And that was also definitely a big influence on my model railroading.
What would you say is your first ever train or train set that you actually owned then?
My first train set was probably the Tyco train set that had a steam engine, the red caboose, and I'm trying to remember the livery of it. All I remember is that the caboose was red, and I don't remember much more than that, but people in the U.S. that got into trains back in the early 80s will definitely recognize the set.
You mentioned earlier about doing the Circus Train. Now, do you own those Circus Trains already in your N scale?
I do own a lot of them in N scale. My largest collection of circus trains would be in N scale, but I do also have some HO scale circus trains as well as some G scale circus trains. I don't know the relationship, but Micro Trains put out a large collection of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey circus cars. So I've been looking around and I've been keeping a list and I've been collecting as many of those cars as I could get my hands on.
Do you have any particular favorite loco or rolling stock of what you currently own?
The favorite set that I have is probably the Ringling Brothers Excursion train set. All of the train cars are black with gold lettering, and there's something about them to me that just looks so beautiful.
What would you say so far then has been your proudest moment of model railroading?
Yeah, it's a hard question. Part of why I find it a hard question is that it's not really a moment of model railroading that's sort of my proudest moment, but it's actually more about the community. I really felt proud when I hit 500 subscribers on my YouTube channel. I've always been very appreciative of the larger YouTube channels that are out there and the platform that they have, especially when they take the time to recognize smaller channels that are up and coming and use all of their hard work in building their channel to promote others. And when I hit 500 subscribers, I felt like I crossed a line. And I felt that I went from being one of the smaller YouTubers to being in a position where I could start giving a platform to other channels as well.
What have you found that's been the most favourite part of model railroad building so far, i.e. scenics, electronics, that sort of thing?
By far, my favorite part is the electronics. I really think of the wiring and the electronics and connecting everything together in that way as the veins and the arteries and the nerves of the train system. The scenery is more the outer skin. It's what you see. But what really makes it happen is the wiring, the electronics, and the hidden stuff underneath. Both animation and lighting, I think, are a huge part of that wiring aspect of things. It's great to see the trains running in circles around the track, but when you're able to do day to night lighting transitions, or you're able to animate something so that it's moving, it just adds something extra to the layout that makes it as if you're creating another world.
And for the final question then, Heath, how useful do you find online social media and forums are towards providing that modelling information that you're looking for?
I think the online forums have made a big difference in being able to try out different techniques. It used to be where you would learn about one technique and that was what you would use. Whereas now you can see multiple different ways of doing everything, try those different ways, and then when you have problems, the other people are actually there and available to help you. I think social media is definitely a positive aspect of model railroading. And I think another side of it, and this is just me speculating, but I believe in general the majority of model railroaders are probably to some extent introverts. We like going down into our basements, building our train sets, and we don't do a lot of interacting out in the world. And what I think this social media thing has done, it's allowed us to be in our own spaces, be comfortable, be with our own layouts, but also interact with people. So not only are we learning and exploring and playing with our trains, but we're also now building these much larger communities.
So thank you very much, Heath, for those wonderful answers to the questions. I'm sure the listeners will have enjoyed listening to all the ins and outs of Humanity Junction and yourself in your modelling career. So that's with those questions, and it's now time to take you into the quick fire round. So if you're ready, Heath, we'll get on with the 3 questions.
Let me have it.
Okay then, so here we go. Quick fire question 1. What is your favourite beverage?
Root beer.
Question 2. What is your favourite snack?
Twizzlers.
And final question, question 3. What is your favourite all-time TV show?
Probably have to say Cheers.
Wonderful answers there for the quick fire round. Thank you very much, Heath, for giving us that little bit of a deeper insight into the model railroader. Before you do go, let the listeners know where can they find you and your modelling world.
The main place people can find me is on YouTube. You'd want to search for Humanity Junction or Human City Junction, and usually the YouTube page will come up. I also have a Facebook page for Humanity Junction, or you could go to sidetracksunday.com, where you'll find myself and 3 other hosts who do a rotating live stream, and I do the second Sunday of every month.
Fantastic stuff there. So thank you very much for taking the time for this interview, Heath. We look forward to seeing much more videos and information from your modelling world across Facebook and YouTube. So make sure you go and check out Heath and his channel, Humanity Junction, and his Facebook page. Give them a like, a subscribe, and most of all, hit the bell on the YouTube channels to get those notifications. So until next time, until the next interview, thank you very much for listening. Stay safe, stay well, and best of all, keep on modelling. Bye for now.
Jason, thanks so much for having me.
Hi, I'm Jack, the leader of MRYCG Juniors, and here is your news briefing for November 2020. Rod Stewart is sailing his model railway across the sea to be near him in his Essex home. The extremely detailed layout has taken decades to build and currently lives in the attic of the singer's Los Angeles home. The 1940s USA city is to be dismantled for the journey and will be put back together in his mansion by the veteran singer and a team of craftsmen and women. It took him 23 years to complete and now includes 5-foot skyscrapers, bridges, a rush hour traffic scheme and a power station. Rod aims to get the layout shipped over to the UK and be up and running after Christmas. The Worley Model Railway Club will be hosting an online virtual event on the 28th and 29th of November 2020. Due to the COVID crisis, the yearly exhibition cannot take place, but the team are hoping that the public will join in and view the live streamed layouts and interviews. To find out more about this event, please visit worley-mrc.co.uk. Model railway supplier Mallet Models of Ilkeston have relocated to a new premises this month. The retailer was previously based on Pellin Street and has been serving customers with a wide range of products and accessories since 2004. Malk has taken the decision to relocate the business to a bigger shop on Bar Street. The new shop will be open for business from November the 2nd, 2020. To find out more, visit maltmodels.co.uk.
Are you struggling for ideas for your layout? Is your model railway looking tired? Or maybe you're hoping to grab yourself a bargain? Then visit Malk's Models of Ilkeston, Nottingham and Derbyshire's #1 model shop. They offer a huge range of new and pre-owned models, accessories and all the scenics you'll ever need. There is also a good stock of almost every paint you may require to make your models look authentic too. Take a look at the website at malksmodels.co.uk or visit the store today at 48B Bath Street, Ilkeston, Derbyshire, DE78FF.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another instalment of the Train Crash podcast on the MRYCG podcast. Today, continuing with the American theme, we're going to be talking about lessons that we've learned from the American modelers and the modeling scene in America and lessons we can still take and learn from them. So, over to you, Oliver.
So the first point we thought we'd like to discuss is, because this is something that we've discussed privately and that we think is quite important when designing a layout, and that is the scene composition of the layout. And obviously with the nature of America being quite a big place, as such, the houses are quite big and the space for layouts tends to be a bit bigger. So American modelers do tend to have scenic composition that we are quite jealous of in the UK. So street scenes that go back a couple of blocks and things like that. They really help to build a scene up and build it so that the track plan isn't the main focus of the layout. The back scene is also interesting, things like that. Even a countryside layout or whatever, there's a lot of scenic, there's fields rolling back into the back scenes. I think in the UK we maybe don't have the space for.
No, we don't. I think it just helps create the impression that it's a completely different miniature world. I know it can be quite unachievable for a lot of UK models. We do seem to have in general a lot smaller houses, property prices are a lot higher, and so it's more difficult for us to have those depth in scenes. But it really helps me when planning a layout to look at some American layouts sometimes, just to add more depth to the scene, create that layering effect, maybe use some clever techniques to use some low relief buildings, some semi low relief trees, that sort of stuff, to make scenes pop out sometimes, come out to be more alive, and also add more detail as well. That's something we see is, we're generalizing massively when it comes to this, but something else I've seen, like Stephen Bennett on YouTube, he's a bigger American modeler, they continue that incredible attention to detail throughout the depth of the scene, so you do let you feel like you're looking at a smaller layout. And composition is something that I think is really important as well when it comes to building layouts, having that variety in texture, variety in colour, and variety in relief and depth of scenery, like height. And I think with a much wider scene, and even probably much longer scene as well, you can just incorporate those different elements of composition in and have effectively a much better kind of composed scene, plenty of different elements to look at. It's not just flat baseboards with track and then static grass on the side.
Certainly, it definitely makes it look more realistic in massive inverted commas, but it helps create that world around the railway, whereas I think in the UK sometimes, due to the size constraints of most layouts, I'd be fascinated to know what the average size of a layout is. So leave that in the comment section below, the size of your layout, and we'll try and work out what the average size is. I think sometimes because we've kind of got smaller layouts, it's a lot more difficult to build them scenes in and still have the running potential that we like. I mean, obviously with your exhibition layouts, you know what it's like to build a scene up in a relatively small space in micro layouts. But interesting, micro layouts were actually developed in the States, weren't they?
Yeah, I think a lot of the inspiration or the pioneers, if you like, when it comes to micro layouts is a guy called Carl Arendert. He's got a website called Carendert, with a C, I think it is. It's well worth looking up. It's just kind of like an encyclopedia of micro layouts, so many different scales, gauges, themes, prototypes. There is quite an American bias to it, obviously, the American site, but it's a fantastic website full of track plans and just general inspiration. And I particularly have been massively inspired by it when it comes to planning my own micro layouts, which is quite a contrast, I think, because we're talking about how America's such a big place to model, and they have a lot of them have vast basements to model a said layouts in, whereas they also seem to be a pioneer in micro layouts. So I think what we can take from it is sometimes the size of layouts don't necessarily matter. So you can have a fantastic layout in a massive scale and a small scale, and that's a really important lesson to take as well. I think so many people can get tripped up thinking that their dream layout has to be 20 foot by 30 foot rounded layout, when actually you can have a fantastic layout in 4 foot by 1 foot and a much smaller scale size.
Certainly, and obviously those sort of sizes mean that it's a lot more portable to be taken to exhibitions and things, which takes us on to another point, which is framing, which is something that we both particularly like about a lot of American exhibition layouts that we've seen not only in the UK but exhibition videos on the internet and the like from the States, is that they seem to frame layouts very well with fascia boards, with lighting that's built in, and it all seems to be very well themed as well, which I think really helps, again, build that scene in and build what the layout's about without actively seeing the trains running.
Yes, I think there's lots of different ways to frame a layout, whether that's using built-up fascia. I quite like to use kind of a TV fish tank sort of framing. I know some American models like to use that style in the home layouts. I think it adds a really kind of fresh trim to it all. It kind of just crisps it up. It draws your focus to the layout, not the raw exposed MDF plywood grain that's beneath it. It really helps you draw your focus to the layout, especially if you use a dark colour on your fascia. Also different lighting rigs. I think that's something that's used very well there. A lot of layouts there seem to be kind of indoors in basements, especially that's I've seen on YouTube in the magazines. So they're really dependent on artificial lighting, and that's something that's really difficult to get right. And so using a balance of LEDs and tube lights and that sort of way to create a natural, realistic lighting look is really effective. So just before we go on and talk about some of the kind of lessons about rolling stock and that sort of stuff we could learn, I'd just like to bring it back to a minimalistic track plan. Now, America is one of the biggest countries in the world. It's got some really rural areas, it's got some really urban areas, but throughout, in a lot of American modelling, there seems to be a much more is less approach to track, And I think this is a very important lesson that took me a while to learn, is ramming a baseboard full of track doesn't necessarily for me with the most satisfaction or the most realism as well. So I think it's often a temptation, isn't it, for all of us modelers thinking operating potential, potential for scenery expansions, all that sort of stuff. Let's just fill the baseball with track. So many points, so many turnouts, they call them in America, all that sort of stuff. Let's fill it up. When actually, it took a while for me to learn this, and I'm really glad I did learn this. I kind of learned this from watching videos of American railway systems, as well as the Karen DT website. And the more or less approach just kind of brings in the realism as well, brings it back. It puts everything into a greater sense of purpose. That track was intentionally laid for that industry, that track was intentionally laid for that passing point. It creates more intention behind the building, and I think that's a really powerful tool for us to have as layout builders, to be able to look back and justify the things we've built with a sense of realism, but also for fun. It can add more challenges. A layout with 20 points may be interesting to shunt, but a layout with 3 points set up as an ingle nook or 2 points can actually provide still a huge amount of enjoyment and more of a mental challenge for me, which is what I quite enjoy when it comes to operating layouts.
Certainly, we've discussed it before, is finding out where you fit on the scenery versus play scale, and finding out what your perfect amount of playability or running potential or whatever and scenery is. And I think there's a lot of American modelers who do that very well. There's a lot of British modelers that do it very well. There's a lot of modelers from all over that do it very well. It just normally takes a couple of layouts for people, including myself, to find out where you fit on that scale. Now, we'll just drop into rolling stock for a little bit, just because I think it's a fascinating part of American modelling. And that is fictional locos, i.e. they're based on real-life prototypes, but they're put in liveries of different companies. It was a relatively common thing in the 80s into the 90s. I believe it's kind of tailed off recently, but it stayed a lot longer than it did in the UK. In British modelling, obviously, we have Hornby's 040s, the pocket rockets as they were, which were done in a very similar way. So you'd have Southern Green ones, Scottish ones, Midlands ones, whatever. But in the States, it seemed to be a lot broader, the spectrum of locomotives that got painted into different fictional liveries and things. And it's a bit akin to almost like Triang, and also the way that Wren operated as well in Britain. That practice seems to have lasted a little bit longer in the States.
Yeah, I feel like we keep saying this, but America's a massive country with so many different gauges of rail. Let's not forget, it's kind of got their equivalent to standard gauge. It's got multiple different narrow gauges depending what state you're in, providing multiple different industries, and they change throughout different time periods as well. And so we've got a huge amount of different oddities, if you like, and I think we can draw so much inspiration from those oddities into our own modelling as well. So you have the kind of the more utilitarian look, I think, of a lot of locos. They're all meant to be rugged, hardworking, easy to maintain, just beasts. They were never, well, especially the freight locos weren't massively concerned with streamlining or how beautiful they look. Obviously they were, but a lot of them weren't. And there's also different interest oddities like cowcatchers, like cowbells, like wooden timber cabs, and the rest of it being like a steel construction. And I think there's so many different fascinating oddities that we can incorporate into our own British modelling as kind of almost freelance inspiration science. I've done this a couple of times with different American-inspired loco projects. Obviously, America had a massive involvement on the UK railway scene during World War II, when they provided like the S160s, the S100 classes, and those sort of designs and almost history can allow us to add our own fictitious history to that, along with our own fictitious locomotive mods and designs, which I think is a fantastic opportunity. And I really recommend you look into the history behind that, because it's really fascinating.
Definitely, and all it takes is for an S160, which are relatively common in preservation in the UK, to pull up next to something quite austere, such as an 8F or even our own austerities, to pull up next to each other. They're completely different leagues when it comes to austerity. And the S160s in particular look immense, just how rugged they are. And yeah, they sound great as well, in fairness. But yeah, and it's finding out what fictional history, we're both quite big fans of fictional histories, that can be fitted into your own railways. Some of the other things which can be fictionalised, and I have seen fictionalised really, really well, the likes of RM Web and on Facebook, is British Mallet designs, which was a design that wasn't really taken up in the UK. However, it was very common in the States. And I've seen it work the other way as well, where American modelers have taken Garrett designs, which never really got to the States, and made an American design based off of Garrett. And it's fascinating the way that the two countries and systems work so separately with designs that did very similar jobs. And I think it's interesting to find out why one didn't work in the UK but did work in the States, and worked in the UK and didn't work in the States. So it's fascinating.
Absolutely, yeah. And personally, I really like some of the American designs. I love incorporating that into my own modelling. You can find some amazing cheap American locos on eBay if you keep your eye out as well. I think they're just a fantastic sort of breed of designs that I think is almost a shame to ignore, because they were designed for brute power and all that sort of cool stuff. I mean, there's amazing videos on YouTube of them working like full throttle up inclines and stuff like that. Proper cool stuff. So, continue with the rolling stock sort of theme, something that we have noticed about the American market, there's not as much as it used to be, it still goes on there, is there's often a lot more separately fitted detailing parts available to fit to the model. So you'll get your loco and it might need the handrails adding, it might need some of the other smaller detailing bits fitting yourself, and even some models were offered as a unfinished model, almost as a kit form. So you'd get the body, the main body, you get all the separately detailed parts, the etchers, the chassis would be maybe fully or partially completed, and you get all the parts and you pay a significantly lower price. It's something to note that locomotives in America do cost a lot more. Even if you do a pound to dollar conversion, they're still more than what we have in British RTR. So these were all kind of strategies to save money for the average modeler, to make them more economic to buy and more kind of save money as go along. I'd love to see this introduced on the British scene.
Certainly, and obviously there's people often have these sort of arguments as whether separately fitted details should be separately fitted in the factory, or whether it should be up to us as a modeler to apply them to your own models. Now, different people have different reasons for doing it and not doing it, such as the swing out of the couplings and things might knock off things like vacuum pipes, things like that. But it's very interesting the fact that it could bring the price down. And every single year, whenever Hornby announced something or Backrun announced something, there's always a proportion of modelers who go, will we be able to get anything unpainted? I think unpainted is a fascinating concept to explore, because especially with industrials and things like that, ended up in so many different liveries that it's almost a shame to buy a model for, say, £100 to strip all the paintwork off it to then repaint it. Whereas if the model was offered cheaper, just in a base coat, and then you could apply your own colours to it, it would free up the market a lot more. And I think that's what a lot of American modelers enjoy, is the fact that you can have that little bit more freedom to either create your own railway company or just paint your own liveries in.
Yeah, I mean, even as a stepping stone, I'd love to see unnumbered examples. I know this has been done in O-Gauge, but I feel like so many models have put off renumbering locos because they have to remove the original numbers in the first place. I feel like if the models, you have the option to have a model supplied unnumbered with a set of transfers with, even for the same price I'd be quite happy to pay, would be fantastic, just so I could renumber the loco or number it in the first place to the particular prototype that I'm interested in. I think we would also break up the kind of cloneness you can kind of see on some layouts. Sometimes if people are running the exact same stock with the exact same numbers on, all the layouts can get a bit samey. But if we were able to customize numbers and opt in for unpainted bodies to put our own spins on with liveries, whether that be our liveries of our own design or just liveries that never will make it into the ready to run market, such as pre-grouping liveries or even some light railway liveries. So I think colliery liveries as well, industrial liveries, there's so much we could talk about with the potential with unpainted models. I think we're both really strong advocates for it. So I think that would be absolutely fantastic to see. That will we actually see it? I'm not sure. It still remains a fairly small part of the American market, but I think it's definitely a lesson to be learned and maybe something for manufacturers to play around with.
Certainly, especially in the pricing that we're currently in. Obviously, we won't go into the price debate because, quite frankly, you could put all the MRYCG podcasts together and we still won't have enough time to discuss the pricing debate properly. But yeah, it's the little things that can be done to help make modelling more affordable.
So on a kind of summary note, the kind of key lessons that we think we've learned from American models, I think maybe if you want to take something from them and research it further, we'd really strongly advise that. Size doesn't matter when it comes to layouts. There's fantastic small ones and big ones. Don't let your space constraints limit your creativity, especially when it comes to building on a small scale. Frame your layouts well, add fascia lighting, it really enhances the overall look of your layout. use of depth as well. Try to get as much scenery and kind of layers into your layout as possibly can, and think about your track plan, and within that, don't overly cram it with track. Inspiration from the foreign designs such as like cow catchers, cowbells, different oddities. Don't be afraid to venture out with your own designs and modifications. And finally, kind of think about a loco side. Be brave to fit parts yourself. Maybe think about how that could impact the UK market as well.
Certainly. So I hope you've learned something from this. We certainly did researching, and we'll pass you back over to the rest of the MRYCG podcast team.
Are you a model railway fan looking for ideas for your layout? Maybe you are a person who likes the social side of the hobby and making new friends. If this sounds like a great idea, then why not check out the MRYCG live stream schedule, where we have a growing community of friendly people who enjoy showcasing their skills, chatting to fellow modelers, but most of all, sharing their tips and tricks to people from all around the world. There are many people in this list who have an assorted range of skills, specialising in many different aspects of modelling, and thoroughly enjoy meeting new people in hope to help you progress with your projects and layouts. Check out the MRYCG livestream schedule now and be part of a fun and friendly community. Find us at mrycg.com/livestream schedule.
Hello, I'm James Cullen, and welcome to Disaster Diaries with MRYCG. January the 4th, 1987, Maryland, USA. Amtrak Train 94, named the Colonial, prepared to depart Washington Union Railroad Station and begin its long journey to Boston. The train was formed of 12 coaches and was populated with various passengers heading home at the end of the Christmas holiday season. 35-year-old driver Jerome Evans was completely unaware that he was about to begin a journey that would change the way the railways of North America would operate forever. The train was double-headed by a pair of AEM-7 locomotives, numbers 900 and 903. At 12:30 local time, the train roared out of Washington Union Station and headed towards a junction, called an interlocking, at Gunpowder River. The interlocking was where 4 lines converged into 2 and was protected by signals in all directions. At the same time as Jerome Evans was leaving Washington, a trio of Conrail locomotives were being moved from Bayview Yard to Enola Yard in Pennsylvania. To get there, their driver, Ricky Lynn Gates, and his brakeman, Edward Cromwell, would have to pass through Gunpowder interlocking. Amtrak 94 glided towards Gunpowder along the electrified main lines, the scenery a blur past the windows of the gleaming aluminium coaches. One of the coaches being used by the Colonial that day was classed as a heritage-style coach, and thus the line speed was restricted to 105 miles an hour. Jerome Evans must have forgotten this as he approached interlocking at almost 125. The signals were clear and his road was set. As he looked forward, he couldn't see the 3 Conrail locomotives grumbling along the northbound freight line. They were going about 60 miles an hour when they approached the junction, and Gates had not realised he didn't have the road. He shot past the signal that was against him, still going around 60. Suddenly, he realised what he'd done. His brakeman was supposed to act as a second pair of eyes and look out for signals and hazards, but Cromwell had remained silent. The 3 huge freight locos screeched and moaned to a halt, right in the middle of the interlocking. There was no catch point to divert them, and the weight of the locos had pushed the point blades over. Gates and Cromwell were now sat directly in the path of Amtrak 94 as it was bearing down on them at top speed. With no time to react, Evans applied his brakes and attempted an emergency stop, but he was far too late. Even if he'd been doing the authorised 105 mile an hour, there was still no way of avoiding the inevitable. At 13:30, Amtrak 94 ploughed into the stationary freight locomotives at about 108 miles an hour. The rear loco of the 3 burst into flames on impact and was completely destroyed. The lead Amtrak loco, 903, came to rest amongst the trees on the west side of the running lines, and the second loco, 900, was buried amongst the wreckage. The coaches of Amtrak 94 piled up together behind the crushed and burning locomotives. After the impact, locals flooded to the scene to help the survivors, and once emergency services arrived, they worked for 10 hours to release everyone who was still trapped inside the twisted remains of the train. Of the 660 passengers on board, including engineers and train staff, 16 people lost their lives, and a further 164 were injured. what had happened to cause this disaster? The answer wasn't hard to find. Both Ricky Gates and Ed Cromwell had been smoking marijuana. To depart sooner, Gates had skipped his safety checks and so didn't have a working warning system to alert him of the signal he was approaching at danger, and he had disabled his dead man's handle. Why had he skipped his checks? To get to the end of their run quicker to obtain more drugs. Had those two been fit to work, then the crash would never have happened. All could have been avoided. Gates and Cromwell initially denied smoking the marijuana, but they later failed their drugs tests. Gates was charged with manslaughter by locomotive. Cromwell made a deal with the prosecutors where he would testify against Gates in return for immunity. Gates was given a 5-year prison sentence with 1 year's probation. An extra 3 years was added on for a federal charge after lying to the NTSB. As a result of this crash, new safety procedures were introduced, drugs testing and improved safety systems on trains. Amtrak's deadliest crash up to that point had been caused because two idiots put recreational drugs ahead of safety. Thank you for listening to this month's edition of Disaster Diaries with MRYCG. Tune in again next month for another episode. Bye for now.
Want to know more about MRYCG? Then why not check out our website at MRYCG.com, a place for model railway enthusiasts to come together and share stories and skills and so much more with the railway modellers in a community known as MRYCG, the Model Railway YouTube Community Group.
So now it's time to tell you about competitions that are available for you modellers. First of all, there will be a competition launched within the MRYCG group on Facebook during the weekly Facebook Friday show on November the 13th, 2020. There will be a question set during the show, and to be in with a chance to win, you must answer this question and get the answer correct during the live stream. The prize is for a £20 voucher supplied courtesy of Westhill Wagon Works Limited. This voucher is valid for anything that you may desire from the ever-growing Westhill Wagon Works Limited range. So why not go check out westhillwagonworks.co.uk and have a browse through all their superb products available, and get choosing now, just in case you're that lucky winner. Also, just as a reminder, the Worley Model Railway Club have recently launched a competition for the under-18s. You have to model a small diorama and take a photograph of it, then submit it for entry. This competition closes on November the 11th, 2020, so there's still plenty of time to get your entry in. Visit the Worley website at worley-mrc.org.uk for further details.
Welcome to MRYCG, Mr. Grimm's here. I hope you've all had a good Halloween, cause I have, reaping everything up. Rewards anyway, for me right away. But, another one, be safe, November the 5th. If you be safe, you won't visit me, and I won't visit you. Take care all, good luck, bye-bye.
We do hope you enjoyed this episode of Off the Rails with MRYCG. It's now time to say goodbye until next time. If you would like the chance to feature in future episodes or send us some feedback, then please send us an email to contactus@mrycg.com. Finally, I'd like to say many thanks to all of you who have listened in and those who have helped to make this podcast possible. So until next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep on modelling.
Thanks for tuning in, guys, to the Off the Rails by MRYCG. This is Sparky 107, all the way over here in Canada. Loving this show. You should too.